Welcome back to Younique. We're now in session 4 of our journey to help you discover your God-given calling, which means that you have made it more than halfway. So far we've looked at God's story, and your gifting. This week we're going to take the next step and look at your passion. But before we do, be sure you've watched the session 4 teaching video at lifeunique.com/primer. If you're in a life group, be sure to also take a few minutes to debrief together on what you learned last week about your calling before you continue. Take some time to review the results of your APEST assessment and share with your group about what you think is your primary gifting. Remember that our gifting functions as the arrow nock, connecting the arrow to the bow. In the same way that the arrow nock connects the arrow to the bow, so our gifting connects us to God's power. It's the place where the grace of God functions not only in us, but through us. And as we function in it, we produce more than we could through effort or talent alone. Functioning in our gifting means functioning in God's grace in such a way that we don't need to strive to do things productively as if everything depends on our own effort. Now that you've debriefed about your gifting and you've watched this week's teaching video, we'll turn our attention to this week's topic, your passion. If we go back to the image of the arrow, passion is the arrow fletchings of our lives. It focuses and stabilizes our life to make sure we live with focus and precision. This week we'll continue looking at the big thought that we introduced last week. Gifting connects our lives to God's power. Passion directs our lives with God's precision. And maybe you know someone who is clearly gifted in a certain area, but they just can't seem to focus their gifting to have the kind of impact that you know they could. They're using their gifts, but they're so scattered and going from one thing to the next, never finding the place where they can precisely hone in on the purpose God has for them. Maybe you felt like that yourself. And in the teaching video, you got to experience what's called the Stroop effect, a phenomenon in which a person's reaction time slows down because something they see communicates conflicting messages that are hard for their mind to sort out. And in the same way, we often get confused between our passion and our interests. Our interests are easy to identify. These are things that we enjoy doing. Passion is a bit more difficult to identify because it tends to lie below the surface of our lives. Now, in the end, when we confuse passion and interests, we become passionate about the things we're merely interested in, and merely interested in the things that we should be passionate about. So, we become passionate about golf and gardening and merely interested in God. Now, if we aren't already tuned in to the difference between what we're interested in and what we're passionate about, it can be hard to sort out the difference between the two. The good news is that we have some tools in this session to help you do just that. The first tool is the Passion Funnel on page 36 of your primer. This is the starting point for distilling your interests down to the passions God has given you. This exercise will help you name your passion in 5 words. For the Passion Funnel, you're going to identify what you're interested in, what you're excited about, what you're driven by, and what you're burdened for. Now, while passion is more than what we're interested in or excited about, we can begin with these things to help us identify our passion. In fact, our passions often use what we're interested in or excited about to express themselves in our lives. I'm going to walk you through identifying each of these parts of the Passion Funnel. Feel free to pause the video to complete each section. First, at the top of the funnel, identify 5 things that you are interested in. What do you enjoy? What are your hobbies? Where do you spend your free time? For example, some of my interests are basketball, Apple products, reading, and music. Next, identify 4 things that you're excited about. What gives you energy? What do you look forward to doing? For me, this list includes teaching, learning, and watching a game. Next, identify 3 things that you're driven by. What are the things that you absolutely must do? What gets you up in the morning? Where do you feel most alive? Now, for me, this part overlaps with the things that I'm excited about, like teaching and learning. Finally, identify 2 things that you are burdened for. What keeps you up at night? What pain in the world do you sense that God wants you to step into? Now, this may be a hardship that you've experienced yourself that you now want to help others through. Once you've completed the passion funnel, use the information you've uncovered to distill some of the threads that you see by listing 5 different words that describe your passion. This should be 5 separate words, not one 5-word phrase that encapsulates your passion. Although, if you can write it in one phrase, good for you. Remember our definition of passion. Passion is conviction that becomes contagious because it withstands the test of pain. Next, we're going to look at a tool called the Passion 360. The Passion 360 uses the wisdom of the people who know you to help you identify the things that are contagious about your life. Take a look at this tool on page 37 in your primer. To complete the Passion 360, you're going to text 12 people and ask them for 3 words or short phrases that describe what you're passionate about. You'll see a sample text in the orange italic text on page 37. You can adapt this for the messages that you send to your friends. You may get some responses immediately, but it'll probably take the next day or 2 to hear from everyone you reach out to. As you receive responses, fill them in on this page. When you've received most of your responses, compare what you hear from the people around you to the results from your passion funnel to continue to refine your understanding of your passion. Take a few minutes now to write in 4 family members, 4 co-workers, and 4 other people who know you well. Then send them a text asking for their help in identifying the things you're passionate about. You can pause the video now and do that. Since you'll probably be waiting to receive some responses to the Passion 360, you'll keep working on this section for the next couple of days. As you start to identify the passion God has given you, remember that our passion often emerges out of the greatest pain points in our stories. Passion also leads us to make tremendous sacrifices in our lives. This all comes back to the big thought that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. An uninterpreted past determines your future. An interpreted past fuels your future. As you've been interpreting your past over these last 4 weeks, I hope that you're starting to get a clearer picture of how your past can fuel your future. Take a look at your life discovery grid from session 2 on page 23. See if you can identify where in your story your passion comes from. What events, circumstances, or relationships have led you to the things you're passionate about today? I'll leave you to wrestle with that question for now. Thanks for joining us for session 4, and we'll see you next week as we examine your calling.